Okay, thank you. We will go ahead and call our meeting to order for the Local Advisory Council of the Utah Transit Authority. It's Wednesday, February the 17th, and we are now about 1:16 p.m. We apologize for the late start, and we will now get to moving on items. To start out with, just want to read that this is an all-remote electronic meeting with no anchor location. And the electronic board meeting determination will be read by Jana.
Thank you. This is the electronic meeting determination statement for holding meetings electronically. Consistent with the provisions of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, as the chair of the Local Advisory Council and of the Utah Transit Authority, I hereby make the following written determinations in support of my decision to hold electronic meetings of the UTA Local Advisory Council without a physical anchor location. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, conducting local advisory council meetings with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. Federal, state, and local health authorities have adopted guidelines which encourage institutions and individuals to limit in-person interactions and recommend increased virtual interactions. This written determination takes effect on February 17, 2021, and is effective until midnight on March 16, 2021, and may be reissued by future written determinations as deemed appropriate. Dated this 10th day of February 2021, Karen Cronin, Chair of the Local Advisory Council.
Okay, thank you, Jana. Appreciate that. Just like to also announce that we have live viewing for public that is available through the UTA YouTube channel of this meeting. A few announcements. Looks like before we get started, first off, we'd like to give our sincere thanks to Mayor Troy Walker for his service as the Local Advisory Council Chair during the year of 2020. He did a fantastic job for us in giving us the guidance and leadership as the chair. And on behalf of the Advisory Council and UTA, he'll be getting a nice thank you gift sent to Mayor Walker. So again, thank him for his service. I would like to welcome our new members of the Advisory Council, Mayor Mark Johnson, who has been appointed by the Utah County COG. And I believe we get to actually have the oath of office administered to him here coming up in the agenda. So welcome, Mayor Johnson. And since we have a new member, we'll take a few minutes and just briefly let each member of the Advisory Council introduce themselves and the areas that each one represents, so that Mayor Johnson can get to know each other member of the Advisory Council. So I know that we'll hopefully get Karen back on the line, so she can take over her duties to run this meeting. We'll let her introduce herself when she gets on. My name is Clint Smith, appointed by the Salt Lake County COG, and I am a council member that represents Harriman City in the Salt Lake Valley. And if each member will now introduce themselves, we'll go to Mayor Fulmer.
Okay, great. Well, I am Mayor Fulmer, and I was appointed by the Utah County COG, and I actually serve with Mayor Johnson. So I was so happy to see you here. I was on a 10-year anniversary trip when you got appointed, so I was like, yay, good to see you. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Fulmer. And Mayor Walker, did we have Mayor Walker join us? Okay, Mayor Walker is not on the call with us. I believe Mayor Johnson knows Mayor Walker well. He's the mayor of Draper City. Mayor Hale, if you'll introduce yourself.
I believe we don't have Mayor Hale either.
No Mayor Hale? Okay. Mayor Mendenhall.
Hi there, nice to meet you. Erin Mendenhall. I represent Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, next up, Mr. Eric Craythorne.
Yeah, Eric Craythorne, the mayor of West Point City, appointed by Davis County COG. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Mayor Craythorne, and Mayor Leonard Call.
Mayor Call from Pleasant View City, appointed by the Weber County COG.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone taking just a few minutes. And again, welcome Mayor Johnson to this group. We look forward to being able to serve with you. Next up on our agenda is item number 2, our Safety First Minute. And we would like to turn the time over to Mr. Ron Kendall for our Safety First Minute.
Thank you, and good afternoon. It's that time of year, and especially snowy days like this, where people like to get out and go skiing either in the backcountry or up the resorts. Kind of a few safety tips that people need to remember is 1, get in shape. It just takes a little bit to go skiing, whether you're cross country or downhill. If you get in shape, and it'll reduce fatigue and injuries. Beginners should invest in proper instruction before they hit the slopes. Always know the weather condition, especially if you're going the backcountry, and check the avalanche danger that's specifically going to be high like today. Give skiers in front of you the right of way. They most likely can't see you. If you have to stop on the side of the runway or on the slope, not in the middle. Look both ways and uphill before crossing the trail, merging or starting down a hill. Use skis with brakes or snowboards with a leash to prevent runaway equipment. Never ski in closed runs or out of boundaries. And if you do go in the backcountry, make sure that you take an avalanche beacon, shovel, and a pro pole with you. And try never to ski alone when you're in the backcountry. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. We appreciate that. An appropriate Safety First Minute today with all the snowfall that we've received. It's nice to finally see some heavy snowfall, and I think we've actually seen that we had a few records broken with the snowfall, so something we've very much needed. We'll move on to item number 3 on our agenda. This is the oath of office. Again, as we have Mayor Johnson as a new member of the advisory committee, she will turn the time over to Stephanie Withers to administer that oath.
Thank you so much. Mayor Johnson, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Mark Johnson.
I, Mark Johnson.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support, obey, and defend.
That I will support, obey, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of this state.
And the Constitution of this state.
And that I will discharge the duties of my office.
And that I will discharge the duties of my office.
As local advisory council member.
As local advisory council member.
For the Utah Transit Authority.
For the Utah Transit Authority.
With fidelity.
With fidelity.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the welcome, everyone.
Congratulations, Mayor Johnson. Again, welcome to the Advisory Council. We look forward to working with you and to the experience and expertise that you bring to this board. So we will now move on to item number 4 on our agenda, which is the public comment. And we will have public comments that can be submitted via WebEx. For anyone that is online wishing to make that public comment, we will ask you to signify so by clicking on the hand icon on your screen. These comments will be limited to 3 minutes in total, and we will call on you one at a time to make those, and you will be unmuted to do so. Just a note, we did receive no public comment prior to the beginning of this meeting via email or phone that need to be read into the record. So we will look to Gianna to see if we have anyone online to make public comment.
Thank you. We do have one member of the public wanting to give public comment. That's George Chapman. George, we'll turn the time over to you, and you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We've got you.
Oh, great. Okay, my name is George Chapman. I've been following UTA and understand UTA issues for almost a decade. My comments are really on the 7-Eleven Ogden eminent domain issue. You're taking UTA is suggesting eminent domain on a very important neighborhood market that is pretty well liked and needed by the neighborhood. And instead of putting a station 100 feet away on a almost empty parking lot, UTA for some reason wants to destroy a very important, valuable community asset, the 7-Eleven market. So I'm asking the advisory board to take a good look at that and ensure that eminent domain is not being misused to destroy small business in Utah. They survived the pandemic really well, but UTA shouldn't end up destroying that business. The double tracking that UTA keeps discussing is not justified or fiscally responsible when you talk about a utilization of only 5,000 riders. I think that's why the legislature downsized it, and I think it is still not justified, except for Vineyard. The Point of the Mountain BRT is not justified for at least 10 years, and transit is not like baseball. If you build it, they will come. Doesn't work with transit. You only have 50 riders a day on that route, and BRT buses have questions about seating safety. And this advisory committee should require UTA every meeting to provide a rider subsidy report, since some FrontRunner trains are, I'm being told, are running with thousands of dollars per rider subsidy. You and the public deserve to know the subsidy per rider. On the Southwest County VIA system, it's over $35 a rider. And UTA should implement a $1 bus fare and increase frequency on standing room only buses like on Redwood Road and State Street. Service should be increased when demand shows that it is needed. And finally, it looks like there's an uptick in catalytic converter thefts in Salt Lake City, at least. And UTA police should step up security in parking lots, because if you get a catalytic converter theft in a parking lot, that person is not going to want to ride UTA ever again. Thanks for listening. Any questions or comments?
Thank you very much for your comment. We appreciate those. Jana, do we have anyone else online? Yes.
No, I'm just joining in. I just thought I'd let you know. You're doing a great job. But
Well, now that you're here, I will, it's been very stressful for the past few minutes, but I will gladly let you take over as the chair of the meeting.
all right. Hey, thanks so much for filling in there. Not sure what was going on with technology. And I got on right when Jana was saying we only had one public comment. Is that right, Jana?
That is the case. We had George Chapman, and he has concluded, and I don't see anyone else who is asking to comment.
All right. Thank you so much. Then we will go to the next item, which is our consent item for our previous meeting minutes. I'd call for a motion.
Ms. Chair, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda for the minutes of November the 18th.
We have a motion by Clint Smith.
I'll second. This is Erin.
We have a second by Aaron Mendenhall. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We are going to go to the next portion of our agenda, and if you notice on there, we've got a new thing on there. It's called consultation with Board of Trustees. And there are several agenda items that it just makes more sense to have a shared conversation about. And so we've invited the trustees to join in with us on items 6 through 9. And as always, we want the advisory council members to definitely speak up with any questions or comments, but it just makes it more open to be able to speak with the Board of Trustees as well as the advisory council members through these next couple of items. I invite Chair Christensen to introduce the trustees and anything he would like to say going into this segment of the meeting.
Well, thank you, Chairperson Cronin. I just joined today, excuse me, I'm joined today by my colleagues Beth Holbrook and Jeff Asterson, and I know Jeff served amongst the advisory council for our first couple of years, and we're looking forward to this dialogue. I think, you know, as we look at, with the exception of Ogden and the Depot District Clean Fuel Centers, the others are more in the planning stages. But having good dialogue and feedback, concerns, and also being able to explain for questions you might have of us, we welcome that opportunity, and but we certainly respect that this is your meeting, and so we want to contribute where it's appropriate. And again, we'd love to hear your feedback as we move forward on some of these projects. One thing I learned early in my public service is these projects take years and sometimes decades to get them planned. And so, you know, you start and you stop a little bit and then hopefully get going. And eventually, like Ogden, you soon break ground. But you got to, we know that the growth is coming, so we welcome the opportunity to work together. So thank you.
Well, thank you to all of you for joining in with us. And we will go to our next item, which is capital development update. And we will ask Mary De Loretto and Mashit Ranu, did I say that right? To walk us through these things.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Cronin and council members. I am Mary De Loretto. I'm the Chief Service Development Officer at UTA, and I'm joined by Mashit Ranu, who's the Capital Projects Director here. We are excited to update you on some of our more imminent projects that we're developing right now. We have the Ogden-Weber State Bus Rapid Transit Project. Can I have the next slide, please? It will list those. Oh, no, maybe back up a bit. We have 4 projects. So the Ogden-Weber State Bus Rapid Transit Project, the Point of the Mountain Transit Study, the Depot District Clean Fuel Technology Center, and then the Vineyard FrontRunner Station. So I'm going to turn it over to Manjeet. He's going to talk about the first 3 projects, and then I'll jump in on the FrontRunner Station project. So Manjeet.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thanks to the chair and the local advisory council. If I could have the next slide, please. So first project to discuss is the Ogden-Weber State University BRT project. And as our chairman mentioned, this project is actually on the verge of construction here with some preliminary utility work being done. It is a 5.3 mile corridor that links the Ogden FrontRunner station through downtown Ogden and onto the Weber State campus, and then terminating at the McKay D Hospital. And it includes almost 2 miles of exclusive lanes, and it includes stations that are high quality. They're different than a bus stop. They're actual stations that feel more like a rail station. That's a unique characteristic of bus rapid transit. And the neat thing about this project is that because it links some pretty exciting dynamic areas of Ogden, it has potential for some very high ridership. You see there up to perhaps 8,000 riders per day. And to give a comparison, the UVX line that connects 2 universities and some major centers in Utah County but prior to the pandemic was moving almost 13,000 riders per day. So you see it's a very high quality line there. And there's exciting things happening in downtown Ogden with its redevelopment, revitalization, very dynamic place indeed. This line would have a 10-minute peak service and 5-minute shuttle service on the Weber State campus. And this will run notably electric buses, and that procurement is well underway. Next slide, please. So the project cost is about $120 million, of which $42 million is local funds for a 65-35% match or split between federal and local funds. And we've had allocations from the Federal Transit Administration, and in fact are moving nicely into the grant agreement process. Next slide, please. So the right-of-way acquisitions have begun. The electric bus company has been selected as part of the procurement. The design is fully complete, and the contractor has begun the early utility work. UTA received what is called a letter of no prejudice from the Federal Transit Administration to begin work prior to finalizing the grant agreement. So this is a strategy to keep the project moving quickly and on as fast a schedule as reasonably practicable. We do expect to receive the grant agreement in the summer of this year. And in fact, construction will begin, full construction begin this spring. Next slide, please. This is a little bit more detail on the schedule. So the construction of the BRT line on the campus of Weber State University would be substantially complete in summer of 22, and that would allow the shuttle to begin operation on the BRT facility through the campus by UTA in the late part of 2022. And the Harrison Boulevard construction, which includes other dedicated lanes, would be complete in summer of 23, which then allows for full operation in late 2023. And we would wrap up the grant revenue process by April of 2024. Next slide, please. So the next project here, as our chair mentioned, this Point of the Mountain Transit Study. It's in the planning phase of the process, and we just got through a pretty exciting milestone, which I'll go over here on a moment, beginning with the next slide, please. So Point of the Mountain is proposed to be a high-capacity transit connection between southern Salt Lake County and northern Utah County through some existing and emerging significant development areas of substantial economic impact in the region. And it's been a collaborative process with a number of agencies and cities. The process began in the summer of 2019, and a locally preferred alternative was selected by an advisory committee and recommended to UTA and the cities of the corridor in December of 2020. Next slide, please. Ready for the next slide. And so this shows the route here. So beginning from the north, the locally preferred alternative, which is bus rapid transit, would begin at the Draper FrontRunner station and then travel to what is currently now the prison site that's being relocated near Salt Lake International Airport. And this site is a redevelopment opportunity, which is named now The Point, with a commission that's been established by the state of Utah. There's a potential for 2 stations in there. Concurrently, The Point, through its state created commission, is beginning the process of preparing a land use master plan and urban design characteristics as well. And UTA is coordinating closely with the Point of the Mountain State Lands Authority. The BRT line then crosses the 15 freeway and then follows the existing UTA right-of-way alignment there, passing through the gravel pit and onto Lehigh through some stations there. And then looking at, in coordination with the Central Corridor Transit Study that's through Utah County, and looking at how we would best terminate the Point of the Mountain bus rapid transit line in the Lehigh area and ensuring a connection to the Lehigh FrontRunner station. This BRT is what the industry would categorize as gold standard. And what this means is that it's almost exclusively dedicated guideway. In this case, it's 90% dedicated guideway, separated lanes, with between 6 and 7 stations, depending on how many the Point land use plan decides to incorporate. And it would feel much like a rail project because of the high quality and fixed infrastructure nature of the BRT facility, with stations that feel like rail and buses that feel like rail once you're on those. Next slide, please. And some of the differentiators between bus rapid transit and rail in both modes, as well as some other related modes, were considered during the study process. The BRT is significantly cheaper. At 8 miles, it's about $300 to $400 million versus rail, which approaches up to $650 million for diesel multiple unit and up to $850 million with light rail transit being what the TRAX is, and diesel multiple unit being something similar to FrontRunner and combination with what light rail characteristics are. BRT has less complexity to construct and to operate as compared to light rail and diesel multiple unit. It's also a lot faster to implement, depending on funding availability, of course. And the cost to ridership related to transit is also a benefit for bus rapid transit. So next slide, please. Some of the similarities which are important is the integration with land use and the possibility of being catalyst for economic development in this high growth area is because of its gold standard characteristics as defined by the industry that categorizes these types of bus rapid transit projects. Is its fixed infrastructure characteristics lends itself to the certainty that the private sector and the public sector are looking for in considering land use planning and economic development. And that is similar to light rail, of course, which is a fixed infrastructure investment. The ridership is similar based on the modeling between bus rapid transit and light rail transit based on what was worked on with Wasatch Front Regional Council. There are a little bit of differences due to the mode transfer. But what's important is that by considering this transit planning early in the process with the economic development land use planning that's occurring in the areas, that there's an opportunity to plan ahead with this facility and greatly improve the ridership that's currently modeled with significantly different land use planning that's already being contemplated in the area. Next slide, please. And ready for the next slide. There we go. So for the next steps for Point of the Mountain is now the advisory committee has passed along its recommendation on the locally preferred alternative. It was presented to the Board of Trustees as an information item and is now beginning the process of making the rounds of the affected cities, seeking input through a resolution on the locally preferred alternative. And then we'll go on to the metropolitan planning organizations, being Wasatch Front and the Mountain Land Association of Governments. It will come back to the advisory council and the Board of Trustees for formal adoption. And of course, we are working diligently to pursue additional funding to advance the environmental and design work that's necessary to bring in the project development process for Point of the Mountain. All right, well, let's go to the next project. Thank you. So this next one is well underway with construction. Normally, if we weren't working remotely, you would see the progress every time you came to UTA for these meetings. There's a lot of construction going on. I see it out my window daily at the office where I normally am at. And this is a rendering of what the bus administration facility would look like. The depot district, what it is, it replaces what's across the street, which is a very old bus storage and maintenance facility, and replaces it with this modern administration and maintenance and storage facility for more buses. And of course, it's modernized and also will accommodate electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well. The initial phase has a capacity for 150 buses and 150 buses, and in the future up to 250 buses. So long-term growth capacity as well. Next slide, please. So phase one, which is completed, really had to do with getting the site ready, and that included demolition and abatement for environmental needs on the site. And you see some of the prior structures in blue or the darker shade that have been removed as part of the site. Just to orient you, this is 200 South here, and this is the FLHQ building here, or the headquarters building. This is where you normally would come in for the advisory council meetings on site. And so that gives you a little bit of orientation to the site there. So next slide. Phase two, which is under construction, it includes the, and substantial construction is well done on this, which includes the building that would house the washing facility for the buses to keep them clean and in good running order, a fueling island, as well as a parking lot that are largely complete here. Next slide. And this shows a little bit of the work that has been done with the fueling island there. Next slide, please. And this shows the wash building that's near the 4th South Viaduct. Next slide, please. And this shows the west parking lot that's being used again by UTA employees. Next slide, please. And this is showing some tie-in work with the headquarters building. Next slide. Phase three, which is also underway, includes construction of the maintenance building and the administrative building as well, and additional site work. In fact, there's significant foundation work that's being done on the building just outside of the headquarters building behind it. Next slide, please. And there you can see the forming being done for the foundation of the maintenance building. And to the right there is a neat looking contraption that was used to stabilize the soil of geotech work that was done in advance of beginning construction of the foundation here. Next slide, please. This is showing a retention pond to store and treat stormwater runoff, so it's clean when it enters our water system. Next slide, please. And this last one shows the remaining phases of the bus canopies and the electric bus charging infrastructure and the solar that could be used to help generate electricity back to the grid and support UTA's needs here and our effort to advance sustainability. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mary to talk about the Vineyard station and associated double tracking.
Thanks, Bldg. Yes, so most of you are familiar with the fact that a couple years ago, the state appropriated $4 million to the state, to UDOT, to construct for a new station for FrontRunner in Vineyard. And as we were going through that design, we realized that in order to operate that station effectively, we would need to add an additional almost 2 miles, about 1.8 miles of double track north of that station. So we are now moving forward with that project. UDOT is managing the contract because of the funds that had come from the state through UDOT. And the design is now complete for the station and for the associated double track. And this says we're working to finalize an amendment on this slide here, but we just, at the last UTA board meeting, that amendment was finalized. So we now have an agreement in place with UDOT for the budget, for the additional budget, what was needed for the station under the double track. And then also as part of that agreement, UTA purchased the long lead items that are needed, the signal work, some track pieces that were switches, sorry, I couldn't think of the right word. So switches and signal work had to be purchased long in advance. And so by the time UDOT was going to be able to sign the contract with our construction contractor, it would have hurt our schedule. So UTA purchased those long lead items, so we'll be ready to go. We're expect them to be arriving sometime later this spring or early summer. So right now, before UDOT can sign the contract with Stacy Whitbeck, who was our selected contractor, we need to have some issues taken care of with the 404 wetland permits that is needed for that site. We anticipate that permit to be issued early April, and then once that is done, UDOT will sign that contract, and we will be able to start working on that station and double track. All the right-of-way that has been needed, we actually don't need any right-of-way other than some temporary construction and access easements, and we've gotten that all taken care of now. And we are still waiting for some plans for the developer. So this is a whole transit-oriented development that Vineyard is working on right around that station. And we are still working with the developer to try to make sure we have our bus access and areas for station drop-off at our station. So we're still in the process of working on that and the parking facilities. But looks like we're finally making some good progress. We anticipate construction to begin probably mid-April to early May, once that contract gets signed. And then construction would take 7 to 8 months. So we're hoping that we'll be able to open for December change day. We'll open that station. So that is all I had on that. I think these are all the updates for these 4 projects. Does anybody have any questions about any of these projects?
I have a question back on the Point of the Mountain locally preferred option. Manjeet said that you guys are working through city council meetings and getting public input. How's that going?
Well, it's just getting started, so we'd be happy to keep the advisory council up to date as we get feedback and decisions by the city councils in the corridor.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the advisory council members for any of the projects that they went over? You did a great job, no questions. So we will move on to the next item, the FrontRunner Forward Program update. We're going to ask Carolyn Gannott to start us on that one.
Sorry. Oh, there we go. Video. I was trying to get my video to go. So thank you. I'm just going to start this and then turn it over to Manjeet again. On the FrontRunner Forward program, this is sort of the program that we're looking at. How do we place some strategic investments in FrontRunner over the next 5 to 10 years? And one of those things is typically what was happening is we had generated a report on the future of FrontRunner that had, in the end, primarily had looked at it, double tracking the entire system, which we still are aiming for, as well as electrifying. And that would be $2 to $4 billion. But meanwhile, there is some desires, and as we desire and others in the community would like to see, is us making some improvements in FrontRunner and being able to provide some better service, more reliable, faster service. So we've actually crafted another program we're calling FrontRunner Forward, and over the next 5 years, and that we're really planning on making major investments to provide sort of express service. So I'm going to let Manjeet talk a little bit about the program and where we're going here. You've probably heard about it quite a bit in this legislative session. If you've been following it, the governor did include it in his proposed budget for $350 million. That is a number that we have generated to provide some improved service in the corridor during the peak hours. So Manjeet, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, for that great introduction to an exciting program here with FrontRunner Forward. So let me get the next slide, please. So a little bit of background, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It is a vital transportation background for the entire Wasatch Front, going from Ogden down to Provo today, and it's an alternative to the 15 freeway And it operates quite well compared to lots of commuter rail systems in this country. As Carolyn mentioned, there's additional investment that's been contemplated in the plans for the metropolitan planning organizations, and it's been studied for some time. Importantly, it supports economic development and access to opportunity. It is vital that we look at many modes of transportation because UTA service area population is expected to double by 2065. As I like to say, people like me are moving here, so we need to plan for more population. And as Carolyn mentioned, there's a strong interest by the state in making improvements to FrontRunner, some early action item improvements, and then of course long-term improvements to the facility. Next slide, please. So some of the service objectives for FrontRunner at the early part of the program here that are being considered are more frequent services so that you have more choices during the day to use FrontRunner, to increase the capacity. Certainly we have reduced ridership now due to the pandemic. Undoubtedly that will be temporary as we look at the past and what's coming in the future. So how we can increase capacity for FrontRunner, to increase the reliability as well. And so having more infrastructure investments allows the system to run with more resiliency when there are issues that come up. Exploring what's called skip stop or express services to look at different options to move people quickly in the corridor. And finally, another service objective is, of course, to have these trains move even faster, which is, we are fortunate to have our commuter rail running along its own tracks. It's not shared with the freight network. Next slide, please. Some of the regional objectives that have long been considered for FrontRunner include providing additional options to connect jobs and employees. So again, it's a great backbone rather, north-south for the region, and how we then make connections east-west and circulators and such to get people from FrontRunner to the jobs, as well as other needs that people have once they disembark the FrontRunner at the various stations. Looking at how we can make those improvements to service that I just talked about that will lead to an increase in ridership on FrontRunner and the connections then to the overall transit system. Importantly, how it can help support real estate and economic development around the stations and in the surrounding areas. To reduce congestion on the 15 freeway. A lot of improvements have been made by UDOT up and down the corridor in many recent years, and at some point there's a limit to what can reasonably be done, and alternatives are important considerations to provide choices as well. And in using transit, that can help improve the air quality, which is important in our region. Safety is always fundamental, and there are a number of grade crossings that would be good to look at how we can improve safety at those crossings, which improves not only safety, but the reliability of the system. And finally, to consider long-term it could be FrontRunner as a backbone to a more expanded statewide passenger rail service. Next slide, please. So the vision for FrontRunner is something that will be created as part of this work program, FrontRunner Forward. And the vision would be a conceptual framework to guide the approach to preparing that strategy and the work program for growing the capacity of FrontRunner. And what it would represent, this vision, is a high-level synopsis of the overall program, and it'll be based on a strategic business plan that will be prepared as part of the program. So there's some iteration between the high-level vision and then working on the business plan. And as we learn more, we will refine the vision as the program progresses. The vision is useful also for communicating what is a complex effort with a lot of investment to what UTA and its project partners are seeking to accomplish with improving FrontRunner over the short and long term. Next slide, please. So with that, the FrontRunner Forward program has its significant investment, as Carolyn touched on, the dollars long-term for an potential ultimate facility. And we have great staff here at UTA, and we benefit from the experience of professional services that bring best practices and lessons learned from across the country, as there are many different commuter rail systems there. And in fact, global practices, for we are a global region, and those global best practices and lessons learned can be brought about from the experiences of professional services. So we have prepared a multifaceted strategy for FrontRunner Forward, which includes program management for the overall program, a strategic business plan, and also, importantly, engagement with our many stakeholders and public and partners. We have already begun some on-call, some operations and planning simulation assistance through an on-call contract that we have already secured for this program. And with that, it will help to inform some potential options for looking at how we could implement FrontRunner Forward. And once those are selected, then we do environmental review and engineering design. And when funding is available, construction projects begin. And some of those would be what I would call early action projects to get these improvements moving quickly, as fast as 2 years from now, potentially, and getting some of these early action projects going, depending on availability of funding. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the professional services strategy, which includes the program management, strategic business plan, and engagement, all throughout the entire work program, and the operations planning and simulation systems assistance, or otherwise computer modeling of various different ideas and seeing what works and the trade-offs in those. And once certain promising ideas are identified through that process, that those are designed and environmentally reviewed and ultimately cleared. And then with the funding, those early action projects can get going, and also the long-term projects as well. And with that, it might be the next slide. Let's go one more. Oh, this is the last slide here, I think. So the funding request for initial strategic double tracking, as Carolyn has talked about, there's a lot of interest with the governor's office, submitted budget, as well as the legislature in reviewing that. There are some peak express trains and station improvements that are being considered, looking at double tracking for about $225 million, station improvements associated with that, and other improvements, additional vehicles to provide the additional service, looking at an estimated cost of about $350 million for some of these early action strategic improvements to the corridor. And with that, Carolyn, if there's anything else you would like to add. Otherwise,
I'll just have you talk a little bit about the benefits of this, what we're looking at as well.
So some of the benefits to these early action projects with strategic double tracking and associated improvements up and down the corridor are increased peak hour frequency to 15 minutes at key stations. Some of those include on the northern segment, Ogden, Clearfield, North Temple, Guadalupe, and Salt Lake Central. On the southern segment between Provo, Orem, American Fork, Lehigh, Salt Lake Central, and North Temple, Guadalupe as well. So pretty significant area with potential of 15-minute peak service across these stations. There could be reduced travel time on certain express trains, and peak hour trains and seating capacity could grow from 8 cars to 14 cars. And to do this, we'd be looking at added sidings and double tracking to support express service and better reliability, and as well as increased peak hour headways there, and signal upgrades, as well as reducing delays and travel time when grade crossing delays happen, which occur from time to time.
So the only thing I want to add into here is that, you know, this is definitely a concept that we're looking at, and this is what we have, this project here that we talked about is the $350 million. We have brought on the consultant to actually do quite a bit of work on this. in terms of determining where is the best places most strategically to double track for value and what we can accomplish. And really what we've been asking is what does it take for us to run some peak hour trains at 15-minute headways express service, so slot them in between the half-hour service that we do now. We do have some stations listed. We're not sure if it's Clearfield, it could be somewhere else. It's one of the things that the consultants will help us work through. We'll have a very detailed rail simulation model that we'll be working on, and then we're bringing on a program manager. So these are things that are happening, but I just wanted to let you know this would be that Manjit's leading this effort with his team, and that we're excited that we're able to start moving some things along as we move forward, and we'll keep you apprised of the project as it goes. And of course, we're out there continuing to push for it at the state level for state funding. So if there's any questions.
Any questions from the council members?
I have one, and I know I'm late. This is Mayor Walker. I apologize if it's been asked. But as you talk about this 350 million, I want to make sure I understand what exactly is it doing, and exactly how many minutes, how much closer to a 10-minute interval, or the ultimate goal, does it get us? And you probably answered that. I'm sorry if you did. I can talk to you later, but can you give me a succinct understanding of exactly what is the money going to do track wise, and what does it do to the schedule, like immediately when it's implemented?
So I'll go ahead and start answering that, and just check and see if Carolyn was jumping in there.
You go first.
So part of what we're doing with the operations simulation and modeling is looking at different concepts and seeing what the issues and opportunities and constraints are, and doing so, and what infrastructure improvements would be necessary to get there. So we don't have specific solutions that we can definitively point to right now, because we've just embarked upon the process for the program, and looking at where can we get the best value and most significant improvements, and then apply the potential funds to make those improvements early and quickly. So we have some high-level goals and objectives that we're testing and seeing how those could play out, and what would it take to implement those with the potential resources that we have. And that as we do this, we'll certainly be doing a lot of engagement and communications along the way to be transparent about how this significant program is moving forward.
So to follow up on Troy's question, I think you said something about the goal of 10-minute train stops. What is the end goal? I thought I saw in the presentation we're trying to get to 15-minute intervals. What is the end goal?
I think that is something that will be identified as we prepare the vision and the strategic business plan. So right now, our initial thinking is to do 15-minute peak service frequency, and this is staff's perspective here. And as we prepare that strategic business plan, we'll look at various options, and then the costs and trade-offs and timelines in doing so. And we certainly want input from the advisory council, as well as many others, in seeing what our partners want to achieve, and that we would do the analysis so everyone understands what's involved in achieving a range of different ideas in getting there. But right now, staff's initial thinking is this, with potential resources that would be available, would be that 15-minute peak hour service. And to do something like 10-minute headways across the system would certainly require a very significant long-term investment to achieve.
I would just also throw in there, Karen, that 15 minutes is the current headway on track, so it has a lot of similarities to that.
Well, I wanted to just add, I mean, I think it's, one of the most unique things I've seen in my time being around UTA, which I think is coming up on a long time for a politician. But the concept that our governor, you know, and I think our governor is definitely, you know, he understands the economic future of Utah as good as any we've had. And he's, you know, he's willing to look at putting state money into this, which I've advocated for this for a long time. I think UTA is as valuable as the roads, and I think it actually should get funded on equal footing to it, in my opinion. But I think it's exciting to see this level of at least budgeting. I mean, I know the legislature holds the purse, but I think whatever we can do as an agency to thank the governor and continue to talk about how this state investment, this UDOT type investment, is extremely valuable. It's what we need right now, and it is our future. I think we need to talk about that every chance we get with anybody we talk to.
Madam Chair, if I could
Yes.
just also comment to Troy.
Definitely.
Mayor Walker, I totally agree with you. I think as a board, we've had a lot of discussions along that line, and the other aspect of that is we build some of these other systems like a Point of the Mountain or a Mid-Valley BRT or Ogden-Weaver State BRT. They really work better if FrontRunner is moving at a much quicker pace than it currently is, where it's kind of in a maxed out state. And it may take us a year to get substantial ridership back on it, just as the public health scenario improves. But in the timeline of building stuff, that's short. It's not insignificant, but it's short. In the long term, we just see it as a great benefit. And I agree with you, the governor and the legislature really are to be commended for leading that on this topic as well.
Madam Chair, could I make a comment as well?
Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. I wanted to just kind of continue the dialogue that was started by Mayor Walker and Chair Christensen. One of the elements, I don't know how many people were able to watch UDOT's presentation to the committee, to the Transportation Committee, in regards to some of the elements. And there was a question that was asked about costs and the structure and in place, and how that could maybe, what could they get a correlation of costs? And Carlos Braceros actually spoke about the Lehigh I-15 improvements that were just barely completed, and that was about 7 miles, I believe, and was about $400 million. And so structurally, when you look at some of these infrastructure investments, I completely agree with the chair on this, as well as Mayor Walker. These are infrastructure investments that have long-term impacts, not just on one specific region of our state, but also along the entire Wasatch Front, and because everything is connected with UTA, as you know. So these elements, I think, add such value when we look at what our population growth and our other economic factors are going to bring us long term. So I'm excited to see this move forward, and I really want to thank the governor as well as the legislature for this.
Thank you, Beth. Any other comments or questions on the FrontRunner Forward program? Okay, hearing none, then we will go to the legislative update and ask Carolyn and Shul Bishop to lead us through that.
Thanks. I think Shul is going to be handling this item from the beginning.
But Carolyn's going to jump in anytime.
That's true.
Now, going along kind of what you've been talking about with the FrontRunner, the governor has expressed interest in expanding that with his budget, but also we're hearing in the state legislature they are looking at really taking an investment, a big investment, which they haven't had it done in the past. So that $350 million, that's what we've been pushing with legislative leadership. We've been meeting with House and Senate leadership, talking with them about the number, and we're still unsure about how we're going to get there. Is it going to be through a bond, or is it going to be one-time money, or a combination of both? we're getting a lot of support and a lot of positive feedback as far as investing in FrontRunner. Also, we can talk about some other appropriations. The Depot District appropriation last special session last summer, it got a cut, about a little over $500,000 cut from that Depot District appropriation. And what we're trying to do is either get that restored back to its ongoing amount, or do a one-time appropriation so that we can not have to worry about any ongoing appropriations. So that's another thing we're working on. There is talk about infrastructure, Point of the Mountain area infrastructure, inland port infrastructure that we might be involved with, at least around the Point of the Mountain, getting some appropriation funding there. Also, to let you know, our government relations team has been going through hundreds of bills. We've gone through at least 568 bills and resolutions. We're monitoring about 85 bills that we're tracking to make sure if it's a policy change or regulation change that we need to make sure that our team knows about, or our staff. Along those lines, there are a couple bills I could just highlight that we've been working on as well. As you probably heard, the ADU bill is probably the hottest topic going on right now in the Capitol. The second one would be this outdoor advertising amendments, which is Senator Sandals' bill, SB 61. We've been working with the League, with Senator Sandal, with members of the industry, trying to work out some way to make this manageable. We have concerns as far as TODs and billboards on TODs and how that might affect our property around those, and especially dealing with affordable housing. It could cause a significant problem for us. Also, another bill that I'd like to highlight is SB 113. It's the transportation amendments from Senator Harper. The big thing in there for us is there's a board governance correction. This last year, when Trustee Acerson was appointed, Kent Millingson's term ended at the end of October, and Trustee Acerson wasn't confirmed until December. So we had over a month with just 2 trustees, and if anything were to happen and we only had 1 trustee, nothing could get done. So what we did is just Senator Harper helped us just fill that gap, make it similar to what it is at UDOT, so that the outgoing trustee can continue to serve until the new one's appointed.
Cheryl, it should probably be pointed out that it's the same provision that's in the Special Districts Act, so it's not an unusual thing. We think it was just accidentally omitted when the Large District Act was passed, but it's just a good stopgap to assure some safety there.
Thanks, Carlton. And another resolution you may be interested in is SR3. We've worked with Senator Escamilla. It's the concurrent resolution encouraging the development of a multi-state passenger rail commission. Anyway, we worked with her. It encourages research for interstate passenger rail expansion. To also look into a feasibility of a multi-state rail commission and identify funding opportunities for that we're all involved with, and it's in coordination with UDOT and the MPOs. But as of right now, those are the things that may be of interest to you. Do you have any questions about anything?
I can't see any of the advisory council's faces, so I don't know if they have questionable looks. So I'm just going to let them jump in if they have questions. Maybe while they're thinking of their questions, what is the most concerning piece of legislation that you guys are trying to follow now? And is there anything that we can do to help from our perspective in each of our different areas?
Well, and right now, the most controversial one we're working on is that outdoor advertising amendments bill. And the league's probably reached out to you guys already to contact. Senator Sandel and your legislators. But that's the biggest one right now. I don't know, Beth, is there anything specific you think would be helpful on that?
Thanks, Joel. I think that is probably one of the more challenging ones. As you know, there's been several bills in the past couple of years that kind of focus on affordable housing. Senate Bill 34 for the moderate income housing reporting requirements, and others that really are trying to make sure that we can manage some of our lack of housing options available. And so this bill is a little bit challenging for us because we're not sure how this is going to go down. But everything that we see with the current language makes it challenging for us to look at sites that have TOD adjacent properties and develop those to their full potential should there be a billboard in them. And so these are the dialogues that we're having with legislators, certainly with Senator Sandel as well, to try to bring in this broader perspective. We have affordable housing that is a key function, but not only affordable housing, but we also have housing needs in general. And if we can take a property that is adjacent to a transit-oriented development site with the city's zoning laws and create a 200-unit development versus a 25-unit development, that is a significant difference in terms of housing created. And so we're hopeful that we can work with the legislators and with Senator Sandel to craft some nuances for TODs.
Thank you, Beth. Any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair Cronin, this is Trustee Asterson. Can I make a comment?
Definitely. Go ahead, Jeff.
You know, Mayor Walker made the comment before, and Chair Christensen supported that. I think now is the time you as representatives in your own political arena reach out to your representatives both in the House and the Senate to engage them in discussions on infrastructure, on transit, on TODs, as you see the importance of those in building out UTA and alternate means of transportation, that the more you engage them and have those conversations will bring to the forefront the importance of what I think most of us and probably all of us see as the growth is coming. Roads are not going to be the only solution, and I think UDOT and UTA both are collaborative, working together to ensure that Utah stays at the forefront of economic development and growth and appropriate housing. So I would just encourage you to reach out to them and take that opportunity. They do want to hear from you. Sometimes it's not easy to connect with them, but there are means through which you can text them, email them, and I just encourage you to engage them. That'd be very helpful.
All right. We'll take it as a challenge. Any other comments, questions about anything thus far in our agenda? If not, we will take a 10-minute break and actually be about 11 minutes, I think. And if we could reconvene at about 2:35, that would be good so we can finish out our meeting. And just a reminder that we will be muting for the YouTube, but anything that you say if your mic is open may be heard. So just might want to mute your mic and turn off your camera for the next 10 minutes, and we'll see you back here at 2:35. All right, we are back from our break to continue the rest of our advisory council meeting of February 17th, 2021. And we will go to the next item on our agenda, and that is service plan consultation and resolution. And we're going to ask Laura Hanson to lead us through this one.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you all today, and I hope this isn't too redundant because I think many of you have seen this presentation or some iteration of it at least once or twice already. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we are here to share with you our draft 5-year service plan. You can see the URL at the top of the screen, rideuta.com/service plan. And you can see the plan in an interactive web format there. We also have a print version of it in your packets. And if you recall, we were working closely with you all through a planning process that we were calling Service Choices, where we were really asking the public and you to help us prioritize our resources for the bus network, focusing on either ridership or coverage or kind of a happy medium in between. We were all ready to share our draft service plan and the pandemic hit. And so we pivoted a little bit. We had different financial resources available to us, and we were seeing some different travel patterns. And so we took that opportunity to take a fresh look at this. And so we developed this plan in that context with 3 main goals in mind. And one was to work on increasing ridership at the outcome. You know, where do we want to be when we come out of this pandemic? And higher ridership was one goal. Strengthening customer confidence was another. And then making sure that our services were aligned with our financial resources so that we had greater financial stability. Everything that I'm presenting here will be implemented after further consultation, probably starting in 2022. The remainder of this year, 2021, we plan on just using it as kind of a recovery and stabilization time, letting our labor resources, our financial resources, let everything even out so that we have a good baseline to plan from. Next slide, please. So we have a 4-phase planning process here at UTA, and the first phase of that is really working with the MPOs on the regional transportation plan. That is looking 30 years into the future and identifying where major capital investments are going. But the RTP does not include things like local bus service. It doesn't include microtransit or our paratransit services. And so we have a plan, which is this 5-year service plan that really outlines where we think we're headed with those resources. You'll see some lines on a map as we go through this presentation. We don't really know exactly where those lines and routes are going to go at this point. They're all concepts, and essentially we're asking for your support on some high-level goals, a vision, a target, and a direction of where we're headed. We'll be working much more closely with local governments on each individual change as we work through implementation of those. And that implementation process is outlined in the green and the kind of pinky purple color in this flow chart. So just phase 2 of a 4-phase process, so lots more work to come. Next slide, please. So the plan is organized around a series of guiding framework elements. And these are kind of these high-level goals. The first of which is service choices. We had over 3,500 people participate in that planning process, and all of the feedback that we received through that process has been embodied and carried forward into this new plan where it still makes sense in light of the pandemic. Another kind of guiding element is system-wide planning. In this 5-year plan, we're really focusing on county-to-county connections and then mode-to-mode connections. And so really thinking about all of UTA's service area and various different modes as a cohesive network and making that work as best as it can. We're making investments in a core route network, and this is a series of bus routes that are our very, very best service. We even see maybe, potentially branding these with, kind of a different look, so it's easy for the public to say, okay, if I'm on a core route, I know that it's going to run early in the morning, late in the evening, 7 days a week, 15 minutes or better, and that I'll be able to get where I need to go without needing to rely on a schedule. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen a little bit of a shift in travel patterns. We used to see a really heavy morning and afternoon peak commute. And so our ridership would go up in the mornings and then die down during the day and then up again in the evenings. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen that really quite steady. It's very evened out throughout the day. And so we have focused in this plan really doubling down on that all-day service as a goal on various different routes. Similarly, we've worked to expand our hours, so running earlier and later in the evenings. This really works to support our essential workers who need to maybe work a shift that starts at 5 in the morning and ends at 1 in the afternoon. UTA will be there to accommodate their trips. We're also using this opportunity to think about new technologies. We have a lot of exciting things happening in the transportation field and industry, and there are some new ideas that we can incorporate to better serve our region. And so I'll share more ideas about that. And then the last one is new projects. There are some really exciting projects, capital projects that are on the books that we're already planning for at UTA. This is a fiscally constrained plan, and so if we don't have the resources to implement those right now, it's not included in this plan, but we have started to realign bus networks to lay the foundation for those projects, starting to establish those travel patterns. Next slide, please. So we are growing quickly. This plan has a series of service change concepts in it, things to keep in mind. Nothing is set in stone at this point. We don't really know exactly what we're going to be doing. We're just kind of setting a target on the map. So every line on the map should be used as a corridor to be served rather than a finalized route alignment. And everything that we do here, or presented here, will be subject to additional analysis and public engagement, public input, outreach with local governments before anything's finalized. Next slide, please. So I'll walk through kind of the main elements of the plan from north to south. Up in the Box Elder, Weber, and Davis County area, represented by Trustee Holbrook, we are working to implement the new Ogden-WSU BRT line. Constructing a new transit hub at the D Events Center. We're adding 15-minute service on State Street and Main Street between Farmington and Ogden. Improving the bus service between Ogden and the Pleasant View FrontRunner stations. Improving local bus connections in Ogden, South Ogden, and Washington Terrace, and streamlining connections to the FrontRunner station. Next slide, please. We see a big travel market between FrontRunner and the University of Utah Research Park, and so we're working to streamline those transfers and connections. And the big gray circle that you see, or oval on this map in the last, represents one of those innovative transit solution zones. We think microtransit might be a solution in this area, or some other type of new technology. Obviously, that needs some additional study, but we think these are areas with good potential for that. In kind of the North Ogden area and then also South Davis. We're starting to adjust local routes to prepare for the future South Davis connector service, improving all-day service on many routes. And then, Madam Chair, Box Elder is just kind of off the top of this map, but one thing that we are working on is continuing our corridor preservation up in Box Elder. And I know we just visited with you all recently about all the various projects that we're doing in that area. So not to be forgotten. Next slide, please. In the Salt Lake and Tooele County area, we're really working to improve service on the west side of the county. So you'll see new connections to the airport and the inland port. We'll improve frequency and hours of service on many routes throughout the county. Again, implementing that network of high frequency core routes. Adjusting local bus service to prepare for the future Mid-Valley Connector, a future 5600 West Express service, and the South Davis BRT. We have some new connections between Tooele and Salt Lake County, and new services in the Rose Park and Glendale neighborhoods of Salt Lake City as part of their transit master plan. Next slide, please. Again, those FrontRunner and University of Utah connections. We've proposed continuing the innovative mobility solutions such as microtransit in the south part of the county. We're still in the middle of our pilot there, and pending the results of that, we'll make a decision on what the best permanent solution is. We think something like that might work in the Tooele Valley as well. So that's something else we're exploring. We'll be working with Salt Lake City to construct a new transit hub on the west side of Salt Lake City, somewhere around North Temple, and then improving all-day service on many routes throughout the county. Next slide, please. This is a map of what that might look like. Again, you can see the kind of big gray ovals represent those innovative mobility solution zones. Green lines represent the core routes. Blue is all-day service, so you'll see much more all-day service throughout the area. And each of these little flags, you'll see a little gray pin on the map. Those represent areas that need additional study or future study before we know exactly what we need to do in those areas. And I should have mentioned that on the other maps as well. Next slide. And down in Utah County, we are working to open the Vineyard FrontRunner station and then adjusting local bus service to serve that station so that people can more easily access the FrontRunner network from their homes. Improving all-day service and overall hours of service on many routes. You'll see the big green line, which is, I think, the 850 route right now, really laying the foundation for that Central Corridor Study project. And then considering innovative mobility solutions, new technologies in the Thanksgiving Point, as well as the West Provo area, and some future study out in the Eagle Mountain area. Next slide. So further analysis, we have a lot more work to be done before anything that we've presented here today becomes reality. Things that we will be doing is doing some small area studies on a few places where we just weren't quite sure what the right solution was. So we will be hitting a number of different places, doing some additional research there, reaching out to the public and to you all to better understand your community's needs. And then this plan will be updated every 2 years. We'll be reflecting the outcomes of these studies, other things that are going on, as well as changing land use patterns. Next slide, please. Another focus for UTA in the next year is really understanding transportation equity and our role as transit practitioners and transportation professionals in breaking down barriers and ensuring that all of the residents in our service area have access to education and jobs. So we'll be doing a series of gap analyses, working on better engaging underrepresented communities, working with local nonprofit groups to make sure that we're reaching out and capturing the voices of the people that often depend on transit the most. So that's a focus area. Next slide, please. And in this interactive online map, we have a vision section as well. And you can click on each one of these little blue dots and it will bring up a little box that will tell you about some additional study or project that we're working on in partnership with other people, and often include a link to a specific project website. There are so many things going on in the transportation world in our region, and this plan is necessarily going to change. We don't know the outcomes of all of those studies yet, and so what we implement will really often, it will require and depend on the outcomes of some of these planning studies, and so we'll be continually changing that. Overall things though, we do hope to expand our rail service, specifically FrontRunner. We're expanding our bus service. That's a goal overall. Cleaning up our fleet, so expanding into more CNG and electric vehicles as we complete our depot district garage. And then responding to all of those additional studies. Next slide. We've done a bunch of outreach. This is why this presentation may feel a little redundant to you. We have been doing the rounds with our trustees, visiting various different COGs and MPO committees and city councils, county commissions. We've had quite a few visits to our project website. I think over 1,600 visits, I think, to the website today, a little bit of media coverage. And so we're really trying hard to get input from our stakeholders and make sure that everybody understands what this plan isn't, what it is, and how we'll be working with you all moving forward. Next slide. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions and then ask for your consideration of this resolution. Thank you.
So any questions or comments or input, feedback to Laura? That was a very comprehensive plan. Thank you, Laura, and all that have worked to develop that. Anything from the trustees that you would like to add to what Laura has said?
I would, Madam Chair, I would just say thanks to many of you who invited us to come to your council meeting. I think we report on microtransit in some and on this plan, got feedback, and most of it was good, a few zingers, but it reminded me of my city council days when I used to throw out the zingers, and but everybody was cordial and polite, and that dialogue's really helpful to us, and I think we want that dialogue to continue, especially as we get into these smaller plans, because that's literally where the rubber hits the road, and we want to make sure that's going to coincide with what you're planning in your community. So thank you for those invitations.
And I would do it right back at you. Thank you to the trustees for coming out to the different COGs and different city councils. I think that at least in the areas I'm working with, it seems like that is where the trust is built when we have that back and forth dialogue. So thank you to the trustees for making that a big part of the responsibilities that you cover. I'm not seeing any of the trustees that look like they have questions. And so if not, we would be willing to entertain a motion to accept the resolution that has been put forward.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Aaron Mendenhall.
Second, Mayor
And I
Hale.
think the second came from Mayor Robert Hale. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I got the right voices there. All right, we have a motion to accept the resolution AR 2021-02-01. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? So that motion carries unanimously and goes forward. Thank you so much to Laura and all of those who have done so much work on this. And we look forward to seeing the plan continue to grow and hearing back as it does. Okay, we're next going to go to our Coordinated Mobility and Constituent Services report by Ryan Taylor.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ryan Taylor. I'm excited to be able to be here today and share a few things with you about coordinated mobility. Currently, I'm the general manager of our special services. Just recently was made in that position, but formerly was the coordinated mobility manager. I also have Christy Allen with us here today. She's the acting coordinated mobility manager. Now, some of you may be asking yourselves, I don't know what coordinated mobility is. You're really familiar with tracks and buses and whatnot. And so we hope that you'll come away from this having a better understanding of what this activity is and why it's important for our communities. So could you go to the next slide, please? So coordinated mobility is a large effort across the Wasatch Front to really coordinate the services of transportation for those people who are seniors or people with disabilities and the human service organizations that provides that transportation, typically outside of the UTA network. And so I want you to think about people that you may know. They may be in your family, it may be a parent or grandparent that doesn't have a driver's license any longer. It may be a neighbor who has a disability and may get picked up and dropped off every day to the work activity center or to Columbus. Or it could be a neighbor that goes up to Camp Costopolis during the summer, a child with a disability that gets a camping experience. All of these nonprofits and government agencies have some sort of transportation element within them, and coordinated mobility seeks to coordinate all of these services together to make them be as efficient as we can and to really expand the transportation options for these people when they may not be able to access the regular UTA network. We also provide funding. So we're a designated recipient for some federal FTA funding that we also provide to these agencies so that they can make the transportation happen. We found ourselves delivering technology. Sometimes this technology is very expensive, and these agencies and nonprofits don't have deep pockets to be able to afford that, but this technology can make them more efficient in what they do, and so we help them with technology resources. And when needs be, we come up with new programs and partnerships to expand the offerings that are out there. And then additionally, we provide travel training so that individuals can become independent in using the UTA service when they can access that network. Can you go to the next slide, please? So how do we do this? The first step is that we've formed local coordinating councils. We participate in 4 of these, one in Utah County, one in Salt Lake County, and one up in Weber and Davis County, and then we support one out in Tooele County as well. These meet every other month, and it's representatives from these nonprofit agencies and government agencies who do specialized transportation. And what we do is they give guidance and input on developing, comprehensive plans and projects and what we want to move forward. They help us in our grant funding requests and in that entire program. And they give a lot of tremendous amount of feedback on what transportation solutions are working, what's not working, and what we can improve upon. So these local coordinating councils are volunteer councils that are supported by these agencies, primarily with people with disabilities and seniors. Next slide, please. So the next key component that this department works on is we fed these FTA grant funds. The particular program is called the 5310, which is to enhance transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. These funding amounts are formula funds based on population, and you can see down in there for 2020, it was just about $1.5 million of federal money that came into our region that we oversee. So we have a competitive grant process for these agencies. They will put in their applications, and then their applications are ranked and prioritized and vetted, and then eventually selected and awarded the grant funds. And since 2013, we funded over 94 of these types of projects. Next slide, please. Some of the types of awards that we've been getting out, and primarily most of the money goes towards vehicles. These are mostly accessible small buses or accessible minivans where they can accommodate different mobility devices like wheelchairs. We also support operational funding, technology, when someone may contract to get those transportation services, mobility management, travel training, and some administration funds for UTA. Some of the examples of some of these groups that have received funding are Davis County Aging. Continue Mission is a nonprofit that supports veterans with disabilities. Options for Independence, Work Activity Center, United Way, First Step Pass, and many others who have received funding to keep their transportation going and expand these options for these individuals. Next slide, please. We also participate in other projects, including some statewide coordination efforts. So about a year and a half ago, UTA was given $250,000 from the legislature to come up with a comprehensive solution and really get buy-in from all of these agencies as a direction for senior and transportation for people with disabilities to really expand that and move the needle. That project was just completed, and we look forward to be able to share that report with you and the direction that report has given us for guidance for the next steps in the foreseeable future. We've also launched a unique volunteer driver and voucher pilot program up in Davis and Weber counties. That's with their aging services and with a group called Roads to Independence. Now this is unique in that there are people, imagine that if you're up in West Syracuse and you can't really get to UTA services, there's not transportation, and it's hard for Davis County Aging to get to you. This provides a way where someone could get a voucher and they would get their own volunteer driver, and then that volunteer driver would get a modest reimbursement to take them to a medical visit or other eligible trip. We took that same concept a year and a half ago and received some funding from the State Aging Board with the Out and About funds. And we worked in conjunction with the rural AOGs across the state and did a proof of concept with that so that they could all test out that same volunteer driver voucher pilot program. It was very successful. We've worked with United Way 211 as a call center so that they can enhance their information on what they give out on transportation and direct people, give them the right resources when that's possible. Another program that we've instituted in conjunction with the Mountain Land Association of Governments and United Way in Utah County is a volunteer driver program where we supplied a couple of vehicles, and United Way supplies the volunteers and the operations so that they can expand the transportation for their seniors, especially those people who have mobility issues. We support the State Transportation Association, IRSTA, and the training that it gives and all the other folks that it supports around the state. And as I said before, we've really dove into technology development. So just a second, we'll give you a little glimpse of some of the technology projects that we've worked on to enhance these options as well. Go ahead and head to the next slide. Some of these IT projects, and these are all grant funded, so it wasn't a lot of local money that went towards these. We were awarded federal funds to be able to push these forward. One is a scheduling and dispatching software. Now, these softwares, if you go out on the private market, can be very expensive. If you're a small nonprofit or government agency, typically you don't have a lot of budget for this type of software. And so we took an open source piece of code that was developed in Portland and we expanded it and we hosted in the cloud so that any of these agencies can use a scheduling and dispatching software at no cost to them. So they can be a lot more efficient in managing their vehicles and their customers, their routes and their runs at no extra cost. We've also been awarded some money to develop an electronic voucher system. We looked across the country and there wasn't anything out there in the private industry that could replace a paper checkbook type voucher program. And so we've been developing this electronic voucher system that we'll put online this year with pilot programs here in Utah and also with a partner in Florida. Davis County Aging is going to be rolling that out in the second quarter of this year, as well as our friends up in the Bear River Association of Governments. And then we also have a Ride Pilot Lite that's going to be rolling out this quarter. That's a simplified version for folks that may not need a more robust scheduling system. And so we're trying to fill a need through IT projects where the private industry hasn't come up with solutions or their solutions more expensive, and we can enhance how these people do their work. And so that's our work on the IT front. Next slide, please. Not only do we give out the FTA 5310 grant awards to folks, we've also been awarded our own for these. The latest that we received were for our e-voucher system development. In 2019, we received just over $700,000 to develop phase 1 of that program. And then just last month, we received just over another $500,000 to complete phase 2 of that system. So we're really excited about that and looking forward to that development as that moves forward. Next slide, please. And last but not least, we also provide free travel training services. So travel training, the whole goal of that is to make it so that someone, when they can access our buses and trains, that they can do that independently. So we have 2 full-time travel trainers, and they do both individualized travel training and group presentations. So they can take individuals out, find out what their goals are, and help them become completely independent. Sometimes for someone with a disability, that might only be getting from their home to work and back. For other people that have more functionality, it could be complete independence and being able to navigate our whole system. Most of these folks will become lifelong riders of UTA. And so we're very happy to be able to provide this travel training services to them. In 2019, we did over 400 and almost 450 individual group trainings and lots of presentations with hundreds of people attending those. Next slide, please. The other thing in our travel training program is that we partner with other training organizations. There are many school districts, for example, that have programs for kids with disabilities, and they are trying to get them so that they can fully access the regular community. Part of that is transportation. And so we train their staff on how to utilize UTA services. We also provide training passes so that they can take them out on the system and in a real world environment, be able to take real world trips on tracks and FrontRunner and buses. Very successful. Most of these people, like I said before, become lifetime riders of the UTA service. And they are able to learn how to ride the system independently. And we track the number of trips that these folks use from all these different 25 organizations that train individuals. And so you can see by the numbers there, just how much they're utilizing the system and getting these people familiar with it so that, like I said, they can become lifelong riders of UTA. You can also see the effects of COVID in 2020 compared to 2019 and the effects that COVID has had, you know, across all aspects, including our travel training and these other systems. And so that's kind of a brief synopsis of what we're doing in coordinated mobility, outreach for the community, and trying to enhance the transportation, again, for people with disabilities, seniors, and others. So with that, do you have any questions, comments for us?
Questions from the council members? I think that it looks like that you guys are doing a lot to reach out to help those who may have limited mobility and hopefully increase their quality of life through being able to get out more into different places. So.
Karen, I have a question.
All right.
How frequently are the visits made to the senior centers of the county?
So we work pretty closely with the county. They run their own transportation. Typically, they have about one vehicle per senior center. Some of those are run by a city that hosts a senior center. Some of those are run by the actual county services. And so they have a coordinator that directs those. Typically, they'll make a trip in the morning to pick up those going to the senior center. They'll drop them off for lunch or activities and then take them back home in the early afternoon. They suspended most of that service during COVID and started doing things like at-home delivery for meals and things like that to keep the folks as engaged as possible.
I just wondered if we made it known to the senior citizens from time to time if they want to travel other places than where their own bus goes out of that center, they would know how to do that and what the coordinated mobility could mean for them.
Sure, that points out a difficulty that we have, and the county really has two programs for seniors. One is the trips to the senior centers and their rides to wellness program. So if a senior needed to get to the doctor, there's typically resources available. Trips outside of that, because of the lack of funding, the lack of operational money, it's difficult, quite frankly. There's not a lot of resources outside of those two primary activities.
Okay.
I'll just add though, Mayor Hale, that we have reached out, for instance, like with the travel trainers down in the south end of the valley where we have the microtransit pilot. Before COVID came, we did specific trainings within those senior centers, and Salt Lake County Aging was also looking at, were there ways that they could extend their services in that area using UTA's microtransit as opposed to their own transportation. So we do outreach as much as we can, especially with the new services. Microtransit could really be a game changer for seniors where it rolls out. So we do that training and make sure that outreach is happening.
Good. Thank you.
Ryan, can I add something just as a teeny bit of background, because I don't know how many of these members are aware, if you don't care for just 2 seconds. So the Coordinated Mobility Department is identified in Utah Code. It was in the original SB 136 bill that Senator Harper sponsored when he helped reorganize our board in UTA. And so we are actually recognized and pointed out in that code, this particular department. And then one of the reasons we do report to this advisory council is because that is part of our duty and our role is to involve you and help you be engaged in the things that we're doing with the community. We were identified as the bigger community partner outreach department of the organization. And that's why we're here and why we report to you. And we're happy to be here. And the other thing just to point out, as Ryan said, we got some funding again from Senator Harper to do that specialized transportation, what we internally have been calling a comprehensive plan, that I'm sure at some future date here we're going to be reporting to you about. But with that being said, that plan, because of the money we were awarded, we were able to get a subcontractor and really do in-depth outreach to the community, to seniors, persons with disabilities, and all those organizations. And so we had a lot more interaction from the community, potential riders, our users. And so we feel like we have a very clear picture of what the situation is in the community, as well as we've got really good feedback and agreement and consensus across partners as to what those solutions will be for those communities, particularly the seniors and persons with disabilities. And at this point, we're planning on that specialized transportation plan for our department will be sort of our plan and the guide plan for our local coordinated plans as we move forward.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I think as the population continues to age, me being one of them, we will see more need for this kind of service up and down the Wasatch Front. So glad for all you're doing. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, the next agenda item is open dialogue with the Board of Trustees. And what this is we thought that some of the advisory council members might have things that they would want to pass over to the Board of Trustees, information items or needs for help, or vice versa, the Board of Trustees pass back to the advisory council things that we could utilize or help them with. So this is just an open dialogue. Just jump in and if you have anything that you would like to pass information back and forth, we just thought that this would be a good place to provide that opportunity.
Well, Madam Chair, I don't know if this is the right time in the agenda, but I would like to request that at our next meeting, we have a dialogue about potential trustee pay increase considerations.
All right, we'll work with that. I know we usually do that more in the fall as that comes up, but we'll get things rolling on that.
It's always awkward to ever throw that out there, so we appreciate the consideration. We know it's been a little over a year, and so but we want to be respectful of that process. I would also, so thanks, Mayor Mendenhall. I would also welcome some dialogue or some thought, particularly as we, as we get through this public health challenge. And, I'd love to think, I was looking at Mayor Mendenhall's sign of 500,000 people vaccinated, which is, a good direction to go. And I think very optimistic about what that result bears out. But we'd love dialogue about what you're seeing in your communities, particularly with businesses and what they're deciding to do and how they're thinking about, where their employees are, are transitioning to. I heard we were in a meeting earlier today, and they talked about them coming back in the fall, and we have our employees sort of rotating through the office. But where that helps us to know is, future ridership and where those demands might be going forward. There's a ton of unknowns, I think, but, any conversations you're having, especially with major employers or institutions, about sort of how they're approaching what they're doing, we would welcome any feedback you might have.
Anything from the advisory council on things you're hearing as far as timelines. People may be going back in to the office rather than doing Zoom type meetings.
In Salt Lake, we're still in the high risk category according to the state health department. We're looking to not only make sure that our frontline employees have access to both doses of the vaccine, which they don't yet, only our first responders do, but also that category of risk be decreased to low risk for us to fully reopen in Salt Lake City.
What I've heard is 4th of July, we're hoping for a day of independence for masks, and everybody that wants a shot has got a shot. But I don't see businesses other than the typical few, but none of the large employers in our city are opening with any definite date at all. They're all in a wait and see still as they scramble to get their employees vaccinated as the age drops down to where their employees are. It'll easily be the 1st of July before we get back to any semblance of what we could call the new normal, the new normal.
It's true. I just wanted to share, Trustee Holbrook came up to Box Elder County, and I've heard a lot of good things from that meeting. She met with the COG, and she mentioned that there may be opportunity for doing the pilot micro transit up here. And I think that's got a lot of people excited up in this area. So just wanted to pass that back your direction, Beth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate hearing that. And I really enjoy making sure that I'm getting connected with all of the communities that I serve. I know how valuable it is to hear, to get that direct feedback. I would like to just kind of point out about the service plan that Laura Hanson spoke about earlier today. One of the elements that I think is really valuable for us is to understand where your growth opportunities are in your respective communities. Obviously, all cities are in widely different areas in terms of, is it just simply, redevelopment? Is it initial development? Is there some other, I'm sure it's a little bit of everything in between. And that is really helpful to us because as we look at our buses, so when I'm talking about this specifically, we recognize that TRAX is in Salt Lake County, so it's a bit different, but it's equally helpful to understand where those elements are going to be in the near future for the growth that you guys are each experiencing. It really helps us to define where the buses are. And as Laura mentioned, the changes that we've seen in those patterns of people and their ridership changes where they're riding more even in the afternoons, it's all a little more steady. The more that we get information and feedback, the better I think that our service plan agreements and our outlook and what we think is going to be of impact is going to be better driven by the data that we get from you. And so I would like to encourage everyone to see if there's an opportunity of growth in your community to say, I'd like to have UTA's planners or some other person that with UTA to come and tell me, here's what I think it could happen and what is this going to look like. I will say, and I'm just going to speak about Ogden BRT for a moment, that has that started to evolve, I think roughly 10 years ago. And it really was this element of people saying, this is the connection, this is the connectivity we need. This is what our community is needing. And I think that really drives positive dialogue. So I'd like to encourage anybody and everybody to get us that feedback and connect with us. If there is a major development in your area, perhaps there is something we can take a look at as well. So I just wanted to thank you, Madam Chair, specifically for coming to the meeting and providing your connection and input on that as well. I think it's really helpful. So thank you. And with that, I just wanted to welcome everyone else to continue the dialogue, and wanted to also point out WFRC has a Wasatch Choice communication strategy that I think is really valuable and something that everyone here has probably dealt with. in some fashion, and that if we can look at those communication structures moving forward with our communities, I think it will really be valuable as well.
Thank you, Trustee Holbrook. Any other dialogue back and forth between the council advisors and the trustees?
Madam Chair, Clint Smith here. Just wanted to make a couple of brief comments. The first one was to the agenda item, with regards to pay that Mayor Mendenhall brought up. I appreciate her wanting to have that dialogue, and I realize that that can be a challenging discussion, obviously, with the trustees and in a public forum. And I do know that Carlton tried to reach out to me, and I apologize, Carlton, that I haven't got back to you in regards to that message. But what I would just say is I would encourage each of us as the advisory council members to have a conversation with one of the members of the trustees to be able to get that input. The only way for us to have a good discussion about the potential of those raises is to have good open dialogue with the trustees and be able to understand, their concerns or frustrations or whatever those may be, so that as the advisory council, we can have a good discussion about that at the appropriate time. Secondarily to that, just a comment, I had Carlton come, on our council meeting virtually along with Laura a couple of weeks ago. He made a comment a little bit ago about some of those comments that sometimes come from members of the council. And I will apologize to them. I know they got a little more than they bargained for that night to tuning into my particular council meeting. But that being said, I would like, I guess, just a little bit of feedback from the trustees in terms of, even though we're members of our own council, sometimes we don't hear some of those same comments or feedback that the trustees get in different settings and situations as they come across, whether it's members of our own individual councils or our surrounding councils and entities that we are still trying to represent, in making sure that we can adequately, really represent the needs that are not just obviously in our individual cities, but the areas of our individual counties and valleys that we are entrusted with representing. And so I'd like to know if they're hearing those other comments and what those comments are, to allow myself better opportunity to reach out to those that are making those comments, to be able to understand some of their issues or concerns better. But again, sometimes we just don't hear those same comments that the trustees might in some of their other settings. And I would like to be able to know if they are hearing those, what they are, so that we can reach out and have those appropriate conversations. Because, with regards to what Trustee Holbrook just brought up, in terms of opportunities for growth, all I have to say is it relates to Harriman and the Southwest quadrant of the Valley is yes, all over. and I know that they are all well aware of that. But that being said, some of the community at the Southwest corner have more specific needs or more specific desires of what transit looks like in their communities. And in order for us as an advisory board to be able to have the appropriate dialogue and make some of the appropriate recommendations, sometimes it's difficult to hear all of that dialogue that is being had. And so the more opportunity we have to hear that feedback as well from the trustees, I think the better off I'll be able to do my job as a member of the advisory council.
Madam Chair, can I respond to that?
And then if I can too.
Well, Carlton, you can go first if according to, I'm fine to follow up after you.
No,
well, it's in the same vein. So.
I was just going to say, Clint, that and the feedback, actually, the stronger feedback was from a neighboring city, not Harriman, by the way. There is a frustration, and I think understandable, just because of the high rate of growth and then really not developing further transportation infrastructure on the transit side for quite a while. I mean, we've gone a fair amount of time, with the exception of UVX, not really having developed any new systems, and not every community was designed to be super transit friendly. I mean, that there was a certain lifestyle desired, and those communities designed around it. and I think the hard part was, and I think it just needs time. You know, the microtransit pilot, for example, which I think can serve some of those communities probably more effectively than a grid-like bus system might. Just really didn't get a chance to fully get going. I mean, we're getting some really good numbers at the 1st of March that would just say we're going to get a really good vision of how that and whether or not it actually serves those communities and in a better way. At the end of the day, it needs to be better. And then with COVID, it just sort of took the bottom of that. What was really telling to me as you looked at the overall numbers is how many of those trips during that period, you know, from April on, were within the community, and how many of them entailed ramp deployment. And when you look at our paratransit service only being within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route bus, a lot of that community, and I say in a real broad sense, really had no great ADA accessibility options, and that opens the door for that. And so I'd love to see, you know, in the robust way, see how that works out, and that would help inform a lot of things. And then I was just thinking about a line that Salt Lake City approached us on, and I think the discussions in that line started when I got first elected in 1997, and that line is not yet developed. And sometimes it takes a long set of deliberation to try to figure out the right solution. And so while I understand it's hard because you can't turn it on tomorrow, but good constructive dialogue and a little bit of pushback is always healthy in a discussion. And everybody was polite in that sense. I don't want to leave anybody the impression that they were rude. You always love to leave with everybody happy, but having a few tough questions, that's part of the job. And I want those when I go to a city council meeting. If somebody's not happy, I'd rather know in the meeting than find out afterwards that they, are mad at me. I can take that, but so those are the kind of things that I heard, and there's just a frustration of, as the growth's happening, they're not seeing the transit solutions come as quick as they'd want. Sorry, Jeff, thanks.
Jeff, you want to add on to that?
Sure, I just want to echo what Clint said. I think it's very appropriate, and I know you, Karen, have reached out to me in a coordinated effort to meet with Tooele County, and I applaud that effort because I think it helps both the advisory council as well as trustees. When we have those interactions, we're able to be in the same room potentially and have those same discussions and maybe ask different questions and get a more in-depth level of information that will be helpful in moving the agency forward. So I fully support that, and it's very helpful because we each have similar roles but yet different roles, and we represent our own communities or areas, and I think we can bring a broader insight to that discussion that might be very, very helpful in moving things forward. So that's a welcome comment, Clint, and I appreciate you saying that.
So Clint, to follow up with your request that some of the comments that they receive get passed back to the advisory council members, do you have a mode that you are comfortable with? Do you want them just to bring it up in our meetings, or would you like a little bit quicker turnaround on those comments?
Obviously there's various ways that we can, facilitate that, whether it be, an email that maybe comes to you as the chair that you can then have disseminated, whether we, help Jana to help facilitate those. But again, I think that for us to be able to, again, we're not able to necessarily meet with all of the other elected officials out there that our trustees do. from time to time. And I just think it'd be beneficial for us to be able to understand some of the other comments they're getting. And I think I would just rely on, staff and ourselves as the executive leadership board of the advisory right now to figure out what the best way is to be able to communicate that to all members of the advisory council, just so that we're aware of those other maybe concerns and frustrations that are out there.
Yeah, and I would echo what Clint said. This is Julie Fulmer. I think that following up on email is probably the best way to disseminate that information. Just because it's accessible, you can go back to it, and there is that quick turnaround.
Good. Thank you for the guidance there. I'm sure that the trustees would like to know exactly how that would be most beneficial to get that those comments back to you. Any other?
I have one.
All right, Robert.
Yesterday, while I was getting my second shot, Dan Canopies, the mayor of Brighton, was the same time schedule, and he has met with, I believe, UDOT, and maybe UTA was there in a meeting yesterday, trying to figure out a way to solve the traffic problem at the canyons on days like today, when there's feet of snow that fall and thousands of skiers that want to get up there and can't. It's stopped. And so the two options I think he's most in favor of, one is, and he's most favorable, is putting a train up there that has a stop at the bottom of the canyon somewhere and takes people all the way up into Brighton and probably a similar one up into Alta. But when he came to get his shot at about 8:30 in the morning, he said when he got to the bottom of the canyon, it was a solid line of cars clear to the on-ramp to 215, or the off-ramp to 215, waiting to go up the canyon. And I don't know, that, to me, that discourages those who like that method or that mode of recreation from being able to take advantage of these unique opportunities that come to us along the Wasatch Front. His situation is probably not unique. There's ski resorts all over. But this one in Big Cottonwood and Little Cottonwood gets a lot of attention. And I think it needs to be higher on our priorities moving that up. And I know we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. But in my opinion, representing this east side of the mayors, that's a real issue for Cottonwood Heights, Sandy, Brighton, Alta, and Midvale, because we are the starting point on the buses that go up there. But nobody was moving when he came down. It was stopped dead. Of course, they're removing slide potential, and I understand that. They understand that. But there were thousands of cars sitting there. And we can certainly come up with something that in 4, 5, 10 years could be a permanent solution to that. And that's I'm just passing that on for Mayor Dan Canoop of Brighton.
May I chime in?
Yes, go ahead, Erin.
Thanks to Carlton and some of the staff for presenting to Mayor Hill's point, Mayor Canoop's point, to the Central Wasatch Commission about the bus option of the 3 that UDOT's considering in the EIS for Little Cottonwood Canyon. But we've also heard from representatives with Stadler about the rail option, and Salt Lake City's very much engaged and a part of the conversations around which option should be considered. But I think I just want to mention again that I think it's important that we keep at the forefront who will be served by the different transportation options, and the flexibility of bus cannot it's a double-edged sword in its ability to be pared back in the future from legislative or other funding cuts. But it's also the most viable option for us to, I think, serve the many different recreation demands, 70% of which from an automobile standpoint are not ski related up our canyons. And so when we look at a $500 million cost associated with some of these transportation options that only serve the ski resorts, only serve 30% of the vehicle traffic up our canyons each year. That's a tremendous cost that we have, I think, need to have a robust discussion about with whatever those funding sources may ultimately end up coming from. Will probably be a vast majority of taxpayer dollars. And so anyway, I encourage anybody who's interested to attend those Central Wasatch Commission meetings where we've been doing a deeper dive on all three of the transportation alternatives. And thanks again to UTA trustees and staff for bringing a great presentation on the bus alternative.
Thank you, Mayor, for your comments. All right, we are going to finish off with the meeting, and again, we're going to thank the trustees for sitting kind of around the table with us during those agenda items. And we're going to go now out to the agency report and ask Carolyn Gannott if she'll lead us in that.
Sure. It's been a long meeting, so I'm just going to quickly, I have one item I want to talk about, and actually have Eddie Cummins here, our Chief Operating Officer, to actually talk about our ridership and over the last year, because it's a very interesting story due to the pandemic. So I'm going to turn this over now to Eddie Cummins.
Hi, good afternoon. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as Carolyn mentioned, this is the 2020 ridership report. As everybody knows, our ridership dropped significantly in 2020. This chart shows weekday ridership. You can see ridership dropped beginning on March 11th, and it hit our low point on March 18th, which was the day of the earthquake. You can also see a significant drop in on-tracks ridership in September, and that's the day of the windstorm. On a positive note, towards the end of the year, we started seeing a slight increase on fixed route bus, UVX, and our paratransit service. Unfortunately, tracks and FrontRunner remained relatively flat during that time. Next slide. This chart shows 2018, 2019, and 2020 ridership. 2019 ridership was slightly higher than 2018, but fell dramatically in 2020 due to the pandemic. 2020 ridership was down 47% versus 2019. Next slide, please. Okay, that slide looks a little odd. This chart compares year-to-date ridership against the previous year. The pink bar is 2019, and the red bar is 2020. As you can see, ridership was slightly higher in January and February, but began falling in March. Can we go to the next slide, please? This chart is very telling. This chart shows historical average weekday ridership. This chart goes from January 2008 to December 2020. The blue line is average weekday ridership. The green line is the 12-month moving average, and the red line is the 60-month moving average. As you can see, the current weekday ridership is well below the historical norm, and it's even had a significant impact on the 60-month moving average. Next slide. This is the final chart and compares 2019 to 2020 ridership. The bus system was down 40% overall. Paratransit was down 52%. Route deviation was down 46%. Mobility management was down 43%. Light rail was down 52%. The S-line was down 36%. And commuter rail was down 61%. And finally, van pool was down 34%. Overall, the UTA system, we were down 47% in 2020 versus 2019. Next slide, please. And that concludes the ridership presentation. Are there any questions?
Eddie, I don't know if you would have the information, but as you work with UDOT, were there more people on the freeways and roads? Were people just afraid of being in close proximity to others? Or is it just people are just staying home? I would have thought that that increase would have started more, especially during the holidays.
Right.
So Eddie,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Carolyn.
So we've done a number of surveys on there during the pandemic, and it was great because we did an onboard survey right before at the end of last year, the end of 2020. End of 2019, we had just finished our onboard survey. So we were able to compare it to what was going on during the pandemic. Definitely the shift from safety, which had to do with more my personal safety, security risk, changed to safety for my personal health overall. And so I think they appreciated the communications, but a lot of it right now is just that there isn't the people aren't back at their jobs yet fully. So that's why we see the big decreases in commuter rail. So I think over time, we've done some benchmark surveys on that, and I mean, continue to do another survey in the fall, and we actually have some reports. We can send those surveys out to you if you haven't received them, the summary of those that compare the surveys we've done recently, because it is interesting. I think there's more. I think what people now are focused on is, yes, safety for their own being and the safety practices we have, but what are the schedules like? So I think that's one of the areas. I will say the one thing that we did see was increased usage on some of our bus routes, because we took the service down in April to about 56% of the hours that we were serving overall in transit in April. When we went back in August, we brought back 91% of the service that we had pre-pandemic. Of that service, didn't all come back the same way. And we did see what we did do is put some more hours on midday and the weekends, because the workers who were taking the service were really essential workers. They don't work 8 to 5. And so they're working weekends, they're restaurant workers, they're working, evenings. So we did change our services. We saw really much high, we actually saw higher ridership, like on the 33 and those areas serving those markets, which they were a little more transit dependent. And so we are definitely understand, and you'll see this as we come over the next year or so. As we start to come out of this, I don't think our ridership is going to come back the way it went down, obviously. And we'll be actually continuing to look at our ridership trends. But I think what we're seeing is that there probably were some markets that were somewhat underserved. And when we start serving them more service in the middays and more service on the weekends, we're seeing people use the system more often because there's more service and more frequency for them. So we are going to be doing some of that focus and really understanding how are we going to recover our ridership. The whole industry is going through this right now. Actually, our numbers are better than a lot of other transit agencies, but still, it's really reevaluating how do we get our ridership back, and also how do these longer term impacts of telecommuting affect us. I don't know, Eddie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit it, Carolyn. I'd say the biggest loss in our ridership are the commuters. You see that's very, very obvious when you look at commuter rail. And so I think as businesses start opening back up, as people start going back into the office to go to work, I think we'll see our numbers start to increase. But as Carolyn mentioned, I don't think that we'll see our numbers go up as fast as they went down.
Well, thank you for the update. Any questions or comments from the Advisory Council members? All right. If not, we will go to the Audit Committee report. Mayor Walker and I sat in on that Audit Committee, and I've got some of the highlights that I can share with you. We met on February 1st, and we received reports of the status of the 2020 internal audit plan and progress on the findings of past audits. From my standpoint, it looks like that there's good progress that's been made on addressing those past findings. The internal audit department performed a risk analysis to identify the best use of internal audit services. And the audit committee voted to approve the proposed 2021 audit plan, which was based on the risk analysis. And then the audit committee received reports on the grants management follow-up audit report, state of good repair audit report, and the budget and preparation management audit report. So if there's any specific questions, we can address those. Troy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think they're doing a good job, and you know, it's been good the way that we've progressed over the years with this audit, with the committee, and with the way UTA is auditing itself internally. I think it's been great.
I definitely agree with that. Any questions from the advisory council members on the audit report? All right, then just a note that we have planned our transit-oriented development workshop in March 24th, starting at 2:30. We're planning to have that in person if possible, and there will be more information to come on that. Our next meeting for the council is on June 2nd at 1 p.m. And if there's no further questions, then we can take one final motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
So I think we have Troy, if I recognize the voice, gave the,
Yes.
the motion, and Clint seconded it. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you again for everybody's input and for the reports. There's a lot of good things going on at UTA, and it's a privilege to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.